Hello everyone and welcome to my honest opinions on The Witness. So, I've been meaning to do this video for a little while. I finished playing through The Witness a couple of weeks ago, and I had some thoughts on it that I'd like to share with the world. So for those unaware, The Witness is a puzzle game. It came out a couple of years ago, I think. It's by Jonathan Blow, the chap behind Braid, and presumably a team. It's a game where you basically wander around this very brightly coloured, very pretty, idyllic island. You can kind of see a little bit of it in the background behind me. Solving mazes. And by solving mazes, I literally mean there are like panels in the world upon which there are little mazes that are drawn and you solve them essentially with your mouse. And that sounds kind of dumb, but I really like that. I used to do a lot of mazes when I was a kid, I was one of those nerdy kids who like got the Mensa books and did puzzles and stuff. Anything with like, mazes in it. I was all over that stuff. Logic puzzles and mazes. So I'm not really a nostalgic person, but it was almost nostalgic for me, like that experience of solving these very simple puzzles and at the same time exploring this big, lovingly rendered world. It's not very high fidelity in terms of, it doesn't look like Titanfall 2 or something. It's not like insanely powerful graphics. But the colours are bright, it's simple, it's clean, it's very appealing on the eyes. It's kind of soothing. There's not very much music or sound in the game, just your footsteps, some ambience. It's a very minimal soundscape. So it's good after work music, kind of distracting. So the whole idea of The Witness is the mazes are only half the puzzle, as far as I can tell, and I might be wrong on this. As far as I can tell, part of the idea of the game is that you're meant to figure out how they work as well. There's no dialogue in the game apart from the audio logs, which I'll get to in a bit. So there's no help text or explanatory words or anything. You essentially just get to know whether you succeeded or failed at solving a maze. So to teach you each of the mechanics, there are different areas that kind of introduce you to individual puzzle elements that add extra twists to the mazes as you go along. And they start very simple, there'll be a maze with like just a couple of different segments with coloured dots in or hexagons on the lines that you have to cross or whatever. And you're meant to be able to figure out how they work from solving those mazes and getting the yes or no answers, which kind of, by and large, sort of works. Like, I'm going to admit it, I used a walkthrough for this game. Like, I googled stuff several times. I don't necessarily have the time or the patience, really, to sit there and kind of trial and error at something that I don't understand in the hope that it will somehow become clear to me. Because, to some extent, in order to do that, you basically have to read the designer's mind. And I think it is quite easy to go to the wrong areas and the wrong order in The Witness. Like, the world is fully open. You can go anywhere at any time, which I quite like. But since there's no direction and there's no actual instructions, it's quite easy to end up either in an area that's kind of way over your head, doing puzzles that you don't know that you need to know something else for, or just simply staring at a mechanic going, I can't possibly figure out how this works. Sometimes you get a puzzle right and you're like, I don't know how I did that. There's one mechanic that uses sound, and I didn't realise. Like, I solved the first puzzle or two that used it, just on my first try, drawing a pattern that I thought might suit the maze, and then just could not figure out what the rule was. So there are actually quite a few occasions where I had to go and look up, okay, what am I actually supposed to do here? What's the rule? What's the system? And once I did that, there's still, once you've figured out how the mechanics work, the mazes can still prove a challenge. Like, some of them are easy, some of them are really not. The game wants you to use pen and paper. I think I did so like once or twice. Well, technically I used MS Paint on the second screen, but I did. And it encourages you to go and draw things out. There are some really clever, difficult puzzles later on in the game that you run into that like combine different mechanics together. Some of the mechanics I think are more fun than others. Some of them are very trial and error heavy even once you know how it works. I don't really want to say what they are because, again, figuring out the mechanics is meant to be half the puzzle, as far as I can tell. So I don't really want to spoil it in case people want that experience. But you'll just have to take my word for it, I guess, that like some of the puzzle mechanics I found to be quite fun, lots of design space, very clever. Some of them became repetitive or tedious very quickly. So they're a bit hit and miss. The bits where it gets cleverer, where you're forced to like combine them or figure out new twists on existing puzzles. But again, because of the game's kind of arcanity, sometimes you have to just Google it. Like, it's similar to an adventure game where at some point you'll find some leap of logic that the designer made that you couldn't possibly have or just didn't think of, like the kind of lateral thinking aspect of it that sometimes you just don't figure stuff out, right? And I don't really want to get stuck on the game. I want to play it. I enjoy the mechanical bit of like moving around and solving the puzzles where I knew the rules, but I just needed to figure out how the maze worked. That was the part I considered fun. But when you just don't spot something, or you've been given a clue that your brain interprets in the wrong way, like, yes, that's meant to be part of the learning experience, but, sometimes it just gets in the way and you've got to just look it up. Like, where do I go next? What have I missed? What's the element that wasn't obvious to me? It doesn't have the same thing that games like Portal have. So Portal is amazing because it makes all the mechanics intuitive. Without ever directly holding your hand, the game is really well shaped so that you basically never feel cheated. There's no aspect of a puzzle that the game hides from you. Like, the puzzles are designed to draw your view to elements that you need to see, or they add new aspects in, by locking them behind walls or behind corners that you can't cross until you need them, and then you now have to go back and reevaluate the rest of the puzzle in a new light in order to get at the next section of it. That sort of thing. The Witness doesn't do that. I mean, it does sometimes, but by and large, the game is meant for you to sit there and go, and take time, like potentially a long time. The game doesn't seem to mind if you can't do it. And although it's refreshing to get that challenge, when the thing you can't do is like, what does the game actually want from me? Something that past a certain point you can't really figure out, at least by yourself. Whatever, just Google it. I find if I have to cheat at a puzzle game, it's a bit dissatisfying for me and presumably for the game designer themselves. So that's presumably not something that you actually want. But I think with this kind of mechanic, this kind of lateral thinking mechanic, again, like old adventure games where you're like, oh, okay, of course I have to use the fishing rod on the can of beans to create a catapult. That's really intuitive. And the catapult's being used to like press a button on the other side of the road or something. And like sometimes you just have to get something to help you with the logical leap. Beyond that, I really enjoyed the kind of moment-to-moment gameplay. Like, once I actually know what I'm doing, I'm in the rhythm of it. I find that very compelling. When you're in one of the sections with like the more fun mechanics or the more interesting puzzles, the game has a really nice flow to it, where in theory, like, it does have this stop-start bimodal thing where you're either walking through this really pretty island or solving a maze with your face pressed into the panel, but that never bothered me. I enjoyed having the pretty soothing setting, again, good kind of come home after work type game. And I enjoyed the mazes, and I didn't mind them being juxtaposed, even if they were a bit jarred from one another. The other thing about The Witness is that it has a story. And I leveled this same criticism at Braid, or I haven't done it on the internet, which is that the story is told very bluntly and very disparately in these kind of expositionary dumps. It tries to be very mysterious, like it's called The Witness, which is like this name that clearly hints that something big and grand is going on. It's set on this lonely, silent island, and you're like, oh wow, what's going on here? Is it, post-apocalyptic? Is it whatever? There are no clues in the environment whatsoever, but there are audio logs that have actual poems on them. Like, you find an audio log and someone starts reading out this excerpt from a piece of classical literature. And it's all this like really overwrought stuff, I feel like English sometimes. That's like, I think the first one I found was talking about how the universe is a poem or something like that. And I left it running and went on to solve this puzzle. And after about 30 seconds, I had to go and turn it off because it was distracting me. Like, it's just this. I don't. At the risk of name calling, this is the most pretentious game I've ever played. Fortunately, it doesn't actually get in the way of the gameplay. The nice thing about the plot is you can completely ignore it if you want. I think the funniest thing I found was there's a bit where you go into this underground room. I won't tell you where it is. And there's a little theatre. And you can put in patterns, there's a few different ones available, that will start videos playing in this theatre. And the first one is literally just like a 10-minute section of this BBC documentary about space, or like space-time or something. You know, it's one of those pop science things where like a kindly older man talks in a warm tone about the mysteries of the universe. And it's literally like this whole thing. It's got credits at the end and everything, talking about how the BBC made it. At the end of this, just in the game, in the bottom. And it's obviously meant to be like meaningful. But I couldn't stop laughing. It's the most ridiculous thing ever. Like, I wonder if anyone's actually sat and watched it. I guess I've seen on Reddit there are people who are really trying to figure out like the full story, the full meaning behind this game. Personally, I find that way of storytelling that's really hard to engage with. In Braid, I had the exact same problem with Braid. I didn't like Braid as much as The Witness. I think The Witness is a much better, like more enjoyable game than Braid, personally. But the biggest thing that annoyed me about Braid was its story was just little bits of expositionary text in between the levels. They were completely separated from one another almost, apart from some like Mario references, which felt really incongruous to the actual message going on. And the text was like, it read like this kind of 14-year-old style literature about this, you know, this girl has abandoned him, and lots of allusions to his princess being in another castle and things. It just really felt really like clunky and shoehorned. The Witness is not quite like that. In part, I think, because it doesn't have any text in it that was written for the game. I think it's all excerpts from other stuff. At least from what I've seen on, you know, while Googling the solutions. Or at least the mechanics. It's like excerpts from poems and pieces of literature and stuff. If you're into finding audio logs, there's loads of it. And if you're into classical poetry, I think that'll probably wet your whistle as well. But for me, I'm not averse to collectibles. I do like to chase them. There are games where I've gone around 100%ing or trying to find as much as I can. But I wasn't really compelled to do that in The Witness. There are some things it has hidden in like in the level. There's more to the island than it first meets the eye. And again, I'm being really vague here to avoid spoilers because the discovery is part of the fun. That I thought was really lovely, like really cleverly done. Gave me this proper sense of joy when I figured out what was going on. But I only knew about it because of the, like I saw it mentioned on the internet. I think there's a couple of bits where it signals to you what's going on, but I think I missed one of them. I missed an area where it explains how the environmental clues to some of the puzzles work, which meant there was one area that I, again, couldn't solve without looking it up. And I think it also goes into like some of the ways you can interpret the island within the game itself. And I missed that bit. I haven't been able to find that area going back to it. But I recommend finding it if you play the game yourself as early as possible, because it'll probably make it make more sense than it did for me. You know, so just on a mechanical basis. I did finish the game, and I went back and found there's a second secret ending after the first ending. I was thoroughly disappointed by both endings. Your mileage may vary. Again, I should probably avoid spoilers because the game kind of is meant to be figured out. It's meant to be secret. I think going into The Witness with minimal spoilers is good. But I also recommend, like, if you want to go in and solve mazes and wander around a pretty island, go and do that. If you're looking for something that has like a really deep woven in meaning to it, the kind of the same way that, like, comparing it to Portal again, the same way that Portal's story slowly unfolds as you go through the game and like figure out what's actually happening, it does not do that. It doesn't do that at all. I'm not sure there is a real happening. There's certainly nothing. There's nothing going on behind the scenes of this game that I found satisfying. There's no there's no obvious, well, obvious is the wrong word. It's not, nothing in the game is meant to be obvious, but there's no like, I didn't find myself satisfied. I didn't feel like there was any actual meaning to what I was doing. I was just wandering around a pity island solving puzzles. Now I enjoy that. I enjoy the hell out of that. So that was fine. But I also think that the game would have been just as good or possibly better as a purely abstract piece. Like, just leave it up to the I say to the reader as the natural expression, but it kind of fits here actually, given the nature of the game. Just leave it up to like the player to interpret meaning into the island if they want. Scatter around some clues. Maybe do it the sort of Dark Souls way where everything's very hinted at and oblique, rather than it being an island that hints at there being something to it, and then kind of separately some very randomly meaning-laden bits of text that are clearly meant to be interpreted in some way and to contribute to some overall aesthetic, but are completely separate from the island itself. They're just audio logs with bits of literature in them. And for me, that doesn't gel. And it's really weird to see, like, both Braid and The Witness are clearly meant to be these, like, really meaningful games. This was partly when there was the whole, like, games as art thing going on, but people praised Braid for having, like, a proper story, for having storytelling, for trying to be emotional. And I think some of it is. I didn't finish Braid. I didn't enjoy it that much. From what I've seen, there's more emotion to, like, subtle bits of it that you unlock later on than you realize. I think The Witness kind of has the same thing. There are some mechanics of The Witness, or like sections of it, that just make you feel a simple joy. But they're nothing to do with the plot. They're just nice things about The Witness. And I think on that basis, I finished the game, I loved it, I enjoyed it, but I mainly laughed at the story bits. And I didn't feel like they actually fit with the game at all. They didn't really say anything to me. So yeah, that's my honest opinions on The Witness. Let me know what you think. I've not really seen many people, like Braid was hotly discussed, but mostly what I've seen of The Witness is the guys from Penny Arcade talking about it and getting engrossed in all the puzzles, which, you know, again, it's very good at. I'm sorry I can't show you any like in-game footage with this one, or even the menu. The game, at least for me, doesn't stay on the screen when you tab away from it. So I just put up a static screenshot instead, but technical issues. Right, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.